I love the line from Gordon Cole here, massive, massive quantities.
One, two, one, two, one, two, one, two.
Dear friends, this is Daisuke, and I very, very much hope that this video finds you well and in very, very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And I find myself in very, very good spirits indeed because I am revisiting this great series known as Twin Peaks. And so, as some of you may know, we have been going through this series episode by episode with these video discussions here on this channel. And that brings us to that episode, which is referred to as episode 25. And it's another one which is filled with a lot of information, a lot of events. And so I'd like very much today to discuss this episode and indeed all the relevant events leading up to and including this episode 25. So won't you join me in a discussion today? So as we have usually done, I will try to focus my comments primarily on this episode and everything leading up to this. Nothing beyond this episode or after this episode, although we might make some hints or suggestions or guesses, etc., as to what might be relevant in subsequent episodes or subsequent events of Twin Peaks, because I know that maybe for some of you, you have already seen the entirety of Twin Peaks. I have seen it many a time, but maybe for purposes of these discussions, I will try to not make any direct mentionings of anything beyond this episode. Although, again, maybe there might be some hints or suggestions or nuances that one can make going forward. Maybe not, as I try to say. So that's one thing. And the other thing too is I don't hold myself out to be an expert when it comes to Twin Peaks. So if I make a mistake, I very much apologize. I'll try to correct myself where possible. But yes, I'm prone to making mistakes, but I will do my best to avoid them. But that being said, I am a huge fan of the show. I've seen it many times, including this time around. And so let me use that perspective today to talk about this, again, episode 25, everything leading up to and including this episode 25. And when we talk about leading up to episode 25, we're talking about Jones and her attempt to, it seems to be, to seduce Truman. And we also see the body on the floor, the bloodied face of one of the Bookhouse boys, we understand, because from the last episode, she knocked him out. And so she is now with Truman, who is in bed. Truman seems to come to and sees visions of Josie. But right, immediately after this, suddenly, Jones, who seems to be, right, in a state of semi-undress, then suddenly pulls out a wire, a garrote strangling wire of some sort, which then she uses to try to strangle, which we assume also try to kill, to assassinate Sheriff Truman. But Sheriff Truman is able to summon up enough courage to sort of force Jones back against the wall, and then she's able to, then losing some of her strength, and that's just giving Truman enough time to counterattack and protect himself. And then thus Jones is a little bit later apprehended, we understand, and put in custody. So this is, and again, a very interesting set of events. And what we understand too is, why was he targeted like this by Jones? Remember, because she was the executive assistant to Thomas Eckert. And so Cooper surmises that it was sexual jealousy. Remember, Thomas Eckert loved Josie. And so we probably can assume, therefore, that he also got wind of the fact that Josie was together with Truman. And so that might have been the incident of where he ordered Jones, or maybe Jones on her own, who knows. But in any event, it was probably to do with Eckert's sexual jealousy and obsession with Josie, and therefore being jealous of Truman to the point of wanting him dead. Fortunately for Truman, and fortunately for us, Jones did not succeed in that killing. So and now we have Truman back, as it were, although seemingly still suffering from the sort of after effects from all that drinking from the previous moment and from the previous episode. And so we have a number of instances where Cooper and indeed Gordon Cole, because we know Gordon Cole returns, the great David Lynch, Gordon Cole returns here. There are a number of recipes, shall we say, for the hangover. And I must say, whenever, I mean, I'm not such a good drinker. I'm very weak when it comes to drinking, and I'm weak to the point where, not always, but yes, I have had my share of feeling hungover the next day, and it hits me pretty hard, and so I don't handle it well. My body doesn't handle it well, but I can say that whenever I have a hangover, whenever I'm thinking, my goodness, I'm not feeling so well, I always think about this episode, and I always think about the advice, the suggestions that Dale Cooper gives to Harry Truman in terms of recipes for hangovers, and also a little bit later Gordon Cole. I always think about those during, how we say, the unpleasant moments of my own hangover feelings, as it were. But I say unpleasant moments because thinking back to Twin Peaks always makes those unpleasant moments of my hangover somewhat more pleasant, in a manner of speaking, because I can think of Twin Peaks in my mind. So in any event, yes, that's my own personal connection with the world of Twin Peaks and the feeling of being hungover. But of course, therefore, we have the return of Truman, and it's nice to see him return. And we also see a little bit later the roles reversed in terms of Truman seeing Dale in love, or suspecting that he is in love, when they're in the diner a little bit later, and he's talking to, he sees Annie and Cooper talking, and Cooper tries to engage Annie in a joke about the penguins and wearing a suit. One penguin telling another penguin, right? So you're trying to tell her a joke. So this is a very interesting role reversal, which I think is another sign of the beauty of this relationship that is between Dale Cooper and Sheriff Truman. Again, one of the great hearts and souls of this lovely series known as Twin Peaks. Continuing on, we have, speaking of Sheriff Truman being back, there's also a gift which seems to be, or it's understood that maybe there's a gift from Josie, perhaps, although we're not quite sure. Allegedly, it's from Josie, but at any rate, it's a bonsai tree. I know the pronunciation given in the episode by some of the characters, including Gordon Cole, bonsai tree, but in fact, bonsai tree. In any event, we understand that this is here, but although it might be understood or might be thought to be from Josie, it seems like it's actually from, or it's been arranged to be delivered there by none other than Wyndham Earle, because we understand, intercut with this scene, Wyndham Earle is listening in to some kind of hidden microphone or something that must be in the apparatus somewhere in this tree plant itself. So, oh my goodness. So here we have more intrigue. And again, Wyndham Earle plot is really unfurling at quite a lightning pace, as we see from the way this episode ends, and Owl Cave and what happens, and the breaking of the breakdown of certain rock structures there, Wyndham Earle present, but of course we'll get to that momentarily. But yes, going back to this tree, this is also the moment where, as I mentioned, Gordon Cole, the great David Lynch, returns. And we have the Gordon Cole being Gordon Cole. And of course, we have information that Gordon Cole provides in terms of haloperidol. This is the drug that has been mentioned in previous occasions, in particular with regard to Mike and the syringe, and also it has a connection now with Wyndham Earle in terms of schizophrenia, or feigned schizophrenia, as it might be suggested. So there might be some kind of unraveling of the plot involving Wyndham Earle and his being institutionalized, and maybe something to do with what happened in Pittsburgh and Caroline and Dale Cooper. But in any event, this drug is making its return to Twin Peaks lore again. It was mentioned before, it was mentioned again. Also, a little bit later in this episode, when Ben Horne is talking to Audrey, he mentions Laura Palmer once again. So these callbacks to previous important events or things or props or people, as the case may be, and Laura Palmer perhaps being one of the most, if not the most important person in the context of Twin Peaks, because after all, in terms of the show, who killed Laura Palmer? This is the question. So haloperidol makes its return as well. So also Gordon Cole makes his return, and he gives that shout in the tree. Very kind of very Gordon Cole like, but it also blows out the ear for a moment there for Wyndham Earl. So it's a nice little kind of a mini kind of revenge, as it were, a mini kind of gotcha. So, but it's great to see Gordon Cole back, and he's hungry, of course. So Gordon Cole. Also, this is very important too because Gordon Cole takes the opportunity to essentially reinstate Cooper back into the FBI. So this is very important. And a new issue gun, Smith and Wesson, I think 10 millimeter, and so stainless steel, and models, what is it, 1076, I think. So that's very important. Also, there's mentioning of Project Blue Book and Wyndham Earl, and how he was on loan he was on loan out from the FBI, and so the idea is that this was also a connection with Project Blue Book and Major Briggs, etc. So it's all seems to be coming together in the study of UFOs, etc. So what does this all mean going forward? Now, how does this have to do with Owl Cave, and what does it bring in terms of Owl Cave? We'll get to that momentarily. But before that, there is more intrigue along the way here. There's the intrigue. Well, let's speak about Ben Horne for a second, because I mentioned Ben Horne and Audrey. When we mentioned Ben Horne and Audrey in the context of this episode, we have Audrey and Wheeler, John, Jack, Justice Wheeler. And so we have the continuing relationship between the two of them, and there seems to be more of the flirtatious banter between them. If you bring a hammer, make sure you bring some nails, that kind of thing, and it's mutual. And so they have an arrangement to have a sort of a flight and dinner. But also later in this episode, those plans seem to be thwarted somewhat, because Ben Horne and Audrey, they have a real heart-to-heart, and how Ben Horne acknowledges that he's never been a good father. But now he wants to try to make amends. He wants to try to do good. And also there is this idea, an acknowledgement that Audrey is perhaps the heir to the Horne Empire, in a manner of speaking. So this is a real kind of connection between the two. If you remember, very, very early on in one of the early episodes, there was a scene, in fact, in the same room, I think, which is where there's a real division between the two, father and daughter, and father says to daughter, Ben says to Audrey, I lost you years ago. And so now this is a kind of another role reversal, or a reversal of fortune, or a reversal of that, a nice bookend to that earlier scene. So it's really nice to see that. I really like this relationship between Ben Horne and Audrey Horne. It's gone through so much. Twists and turns, very turbulent at times. Remember One-Eye Jackson, what happened, or what nearly happened there, which is really quite horrible to even fathom. But then Ben Horne hit rock bottom, which then compelled Audrey to essentially step up and assume a type of role of authority or leadership within the Horne clan. And so now she's in this position where she is now really beginning to be able to help her father out more, and she seems in turn to be willing to take that role and responsibility. So there's that. Of course, then it begs the question, what will happen between her and Jack? Will there be a type of a block to that relationship, etc.? Who knows what's going to happen? Incidentally, too, he does say to Ben Horne, I think I'm falling in love with your daughter. So, and Ben Horne seems to be welcoming that as he gives him a carrot. So yes, we'll see what happens. I love that shot, by the way, of the two of them sitting on the couch after Audrey leaves. So well done. So we'll have to see what happens. So speaking of Ben Horne, what's going on between Ben Horne and Eileen Hayward, I wonder? Because Eileen Hayward is later seen going to the Great Northern, and Donna follows. And then she is seen by Audrey and Donna, who are sort of eavesdropping on the private meeting between Eileen and Ben Horne in the office there. But something to do with letters, something to do with that night. There seems to be something of the past that's coming back, or maybe Ben seems to want to bring something back. Eileen maybe is hesitant, not wanting to tell someone something of what might have happened in the past, what's going on? Again, the mind is beginning to explode or burst forth with possible revelations. Maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing, who knows. But the suspicions seem to rise too when Donna, a little bit later, at home with Doc Hayward, after she's reading the postcard from James, who seems to be writing from San Francisco, and then he said, first San Francisco, next stop Mexico. And so he has a lot of stories, and indeed, that I'm sure he will tell if and when he returns. Of course, Donna hopes and believes that he will return, and Doc Hayward, of course, expresses the same sentiment about James. James's life is now on the road, right, out on the road, right. Indeed, to James, the message to James, I'm sure Donna feels in her heart as she's reading the postcard there, may the road rise up to meet your wheels. But in any event, yes. There's also this scene, this kind of tense scene between father and daughter here, this time between Doc Hayward and Donna, where Donna is asking about what's there between Eileen, her mother, and Ben Horne. And Doc Hayward seems to be just saying, "Oh, there's probably nothing. They don't know each other. It probably has to do with her charity work." And yeah, that's it. It was something about her charity. That's what she told me. That's what Doc Hayward says a little bit later as he's going up to street. But Donna says, "Oh, she never told me anything about it." So this seems to be not quite congruent with the tone of the conversation that we saw between Eileen and Ben back at the Great Northern. So what's going on here? What does Doc Hayward know, if anything? And there's a kind of look that Doc Hayward gives a little bit later in the scene, because then, of course, the doorbell rings, and we understand that there's a bouquet of flowers for her mother from where there's no card. So what's going on here? What's going on with Eileen, or the mother? What's going on with Doc Hayward? Where are these flowers coming from? And what's going on between Ben and Eileen? What's going on? What's going on? Again, we'll have to wait and see. This is another mystery that it seems Donna is intent on getting to the bottom of. So we shall see what happens with this particular mystery going forward. Incidentally, too, there's this interesting exchange when Donna's at the Great Northern asking for Audrey at the lobby there. That's where she sees Mike and Nadine checking out. How was their night? Mike is asking. He says, "Unbelievable." So, my goodness, one can only imagine what must have transpired during that night between Nadine and Mike. But in any event, yes, Mike and Donna exchange a quick greeting, as does Nadine as well. There's a little bit of jealousy, perhaps, in the tone of voice of Nadine. But in any event, yes, they go one way, and of course Donna and Audrey go the other. So many paths cross and lead away and lead towards each other, it seems, in this world of Twin Peaks. Yes, and then of course also we have more intrigue with regard to Miss Twin Peaks contest, and there's all these flyers. Annie picks one up when she's cleaning up the counter at the Double R. Also, there's references between Leo and Wyndham Earl, and here's the reference to the king and cards and the queen. Who is the queen? Who is the king? And of course, we see pictures cut out of these various members of the Twin Peaks community, with Dale, of course, with the card of the king. So there's something quite sinister with cards. And remember, we had the card motif somewhat earlier with One-Eyed Jacks and that storyline. Now the card motif, the playing card motif, seems to be coming back. And also this implication that Wyndham Earl hints at, whoever wins the Miss Twin Peaks contest will have the prize of death, I think. So what's going on here? And what does Miss Twin Peaks contest have to do with Wyndham Earl and the chess and these cards? And what of Leo? You see that brief glimpse of Leo as he looks at the card with Shelley's face on it. So what's going to happen here? I wonder. Again, the plot thickens, as it always does in the world of Twin Peaks. Incidentally, too, there's that kind of creepy moment between Audrey and Wyndham Earl, disguised as a type of professor of some sort, as she's at the library. And she's, of course, very friendly at first, and asking him about a particular poem, in reference to the poem that was written on the 3 pieces of paper that were delivered to Donna, Shelley, and Audrey, respectively. And then they figured out that it had made up this singular piece of writing that had this very flowery language. And then, yes, there is this moment between Audrey and this person who is disguised. Again, Wyndham Earle, the master of disguises. But then Audrey seems to feel a little bit uncomfortable. At first, she's very friendly, but then suddenly she feels uncomfortable, and then she decides to leave immediately. But yes, that's another kind of creepy moment, and so Wyndham Earle seems to be popping up basically everywhere and anywhere, very ubiquitous. But again, we shall see what happens in store for Audrey and for Shelley and for Donna, and indeed for others that might be possibly within harm's way, or maybe running the risk of being in the harm's way of this very dangerous person known as Wyndham Earle. But we shall see going forward. And then there is this. Speaking of Wyndham Earle, the plot line involves Owl Cave and the discovery of certain images and pictographs that can be found in Owl Cave, with law enforcement going in and investigating this. But how did they get there in the first place? Well, while Dale Cooper is in the Double R, he goes there with Gordon Cole. In a very memorable scene, right? Gordon Cole is immediately attracted to Shelley Johnson. And so Gordon Cole summons up the courage to go over to the counter, right? And he says, right, and anything that Shelley says, he can hear. He can hear, although, he's had these things turned up to the max. He can hear everything that she says. I love the line by Margaret, this cherry pie is a miracle. And I love the line from Gordon Cole here, massive, massive quantities. So we have a lot going on here. So what's going to happen between Shelley Johnson and Gordon Cole? I wonder. It's very interesting. Incidentally, I love David Lynch here, and I love his earnestness, especially when he's talking with this Shelley Johnson, this wonderful person. Reminding him of Venus de Milo and other images and of beauty and sort of that eternal beauty of sorts. So very interesting indeed. What's going to happen there? But then, of course, the latter half of this scene in the diner, Sheriff Truman joins Cooper here, of course, but Cooper at the meantime is drawing on a piece of paper or napkin, and he's what he says later is he's combining the two images, the sort of tattoo or marking that was found on Major Briggs' neck on the one hand, and also the marking that Margaret describes, Logley describes, that she has on her body on the other, and they're similar but different. So he kind of combines the two, and he's just drawing out the combined image. And as he's doing this, Sheriff Truman joins him, and then Annie, of course, goes to the table and serves him. And he's automatically just lit up. You can see in his face that he's totally smitten now with Annie. And indeed, a little bit later, Sheriff Truman catches this bit as well. And that's what I mentioned before about the role reversal, really lovely between the two men. And this is the occasion where Cooper asks, how she is, right? And so Annie is very honest, right? Because she says that she's not quite used to these social niceties, and she's very almost too honest about this. She's fine. No, she feels weird. She's very honest. So it's interesting. Here we have a scene where Annie's talking about this, and she's talking about this because it's a scene where we're asking the question, or Dale's asking the question, we are too, how's Annie, right? How's Annie? And indeed she is giving us her answer to the question, how's Annie? But in any event, yes, we have the joke about the penguins, and of course this is giving us the clue, and Sheriff Truman the clue, and indeed Dale Cooper the clue that maybe he is indeed too falling in love with this person Annie. So we shall see. And Annie is too laughing the joke, and she's also coming to this with a sense of joy and having fun. And of course this leads a little bit later, after Cooper returns from Owl Cave. She sees her at the bar there, and so there's occasion for them to have an intimate moment. He then sees the mark on her wrist again, and he asks about this, and she says she's not ready, and he is very honest with her and says, maybe I can help. And so maybe that might lead to a further step in the relationship between Annie and Dale Cooper. Again, what's going to happen between the two of them? Who knows? Who knows? But there seems to be something going on between them. And indeed, remember when Annie is talking with Shelley, he's talking about Dale Cooper. She's talking about Dale Cooper, asking about him. She says she's not interested in relationships at the moment, but maybe that's not quite the case. Maybe she is interested. She's just not saying she's interested. But in any event, we have a number of things happening there. So what's going to happen between Annie and Dale Cooper? Again, we shall have to wait and see. And of course, also, this is all I'm dancing around one of the key sequences in this episode, excuse me, which is about Owl Cave. So of course this drawing, as after the joke with the penguins, then Annie then recognizes this as being associated with Owl Cave. And so Owl Cave, what's Owl Cave? And so this leads to this sort of the equipment with Andy and Lucy and spelunking. And then later we have Andy and Truman and Hawk and Cooper then visiting this place, Owl Cave. And then we have Andy in this, and we have this the image, the pictograph that's on the rock face there. And Andy, bless his heart, one of the great things about Andy is he knows, or perhaps it's just fate or whatever it is, but he seems to do the thing that is the perfect thing at the moment. Remember when when Albert comes back, and then they're at the Leo Johnson's house or outside, and Andy steps on the plank of wood, and it hits his face, but it reveals the hidden compartment of the drugs and the boots or the shoes right there. Good job, Andy. It's same thing happening here. So, right, again, because of the owl attack, some kind of owl chaos, right? The pickaxe is then by Andy is then hitting the wall there, and so it reveals more inside. There's a pole or a spear, a wooden pole, and on the end there's a kind of marking. There's a marking there, and so let's pay attention to these markings. They may have already come up, or they might come up in future images that we might see in Twin Peaks legend and lore going forward, or they may not. Who knows? Especially maybe if they're turned upside down one way or another, as indeed Windom Earle seems to gather from his visit to this particular location prior to the end of the episode. Because when that happens and the twist happens, rocks or something seem to be crumbling. Something might be revealed underneath. Who knows? I don't know. Or maybe I do know. I'm just not going to say. We'll wait for further discussions in subsequent video discussions here. But in any event, yes, maybe we should pay attention to these images, these pictographs, these things that might be suggestive of, again, some kind of presence, some kind of meaning or significance or influence of some sort. And again, we have to remember all these things that we've been hearing so far: Project Blue Book, White Lodge, Black Lodge, and the like. So what's going on here? Are these all connected? Maybe yes, maybe no. Again, we shall have to wait and see. But it seems to be something that Windom Earle seems to be paying attention to, because this is why else would Windom Earle be there at the very end of the episode, except maybe that it seems to be important. Perhaps not, but maybe it is part of what it is he's seems to be pursuing, whatever the case may be. But it could be important going forward. We shall see when we get to future episodes and future episode discussions. So I think, yes, I think we are. I think we can end the discussion there, perhaps, in terms of this episode. Again, there's a lot to be said here. It seems too that there's more mention of this Miss Twin Peaks contest, so maybe this is going to have some presence going forward. It's nice to see the return of James, at least in postcard fashion, and again, more intrigue about Eileen Hayward and Doc Hayward, and then Ben Horn. What's Donna going to find out, if anything? What's going to happen between Audrey and Jack? What's going to happen between Dale and Annie? And right, and what's going to happen between Shelley and Gordon Cole? My goodness, the possibilities My goodness, the possibilities, yes. But what else is new, right? Because possibilities are endless in a place like Twin Peaks. So, my dear friends, that's it for now. So let's continue our discussions in future video discussions. But until then, until the next video, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great TV shows like Twin Peaks. So until the next video, my dear friends, thank you and cheers.